So, how long should you own a MacBook Pro for? Let's dive in deeper and see if we can find an answer. So, in order to find out how long you should own a MacBook Pro, we need to find out how much a MacBook Pro costs to own per day. What we do to figure out the cost per day is take the starting cost of the MacBook Pro, the current value of the MacBook Pro, and the age. So what I did was I found out how much loss you have, so the difference between the starting value and the current value, and then divided that by the number of days that you've had the computer, aka how old the computer is. So what I did was I chose the top of the range 15-inch MacBook Pro, and I went through all of the different models from 2017 all the way down to 2010, and I ran the math on those numbers, and I found out a couple of interesting things. So let's go through some of my results. So starting with the most recent MacBook Pros, the Touch Bar. There are two models of those. There's the 2016 and the 2017 models. And I found, interestingly enough, that on average, they both cost about $1.37 per day to own. Now that is if you sell them right now. These computers are both still pretty new. The 2017 is still the latest model. So these figures are probably going to decrease over time because MacBook Pros tend to have a steeper drop off right at the beginning and then they flatten out as they get older. Now this tends to happen to most new items. If you have a new car, the moment you drive it off the lot is when you lose the most money. Here's an interesting thing that I found out. If we look at the sort of middle ground MacBook Pro, which is the Retina MacBook Pro, before the Touch Bar and after the unibody models, they all have very, very similar cost per day figures. So I found out that the mid-2015 model costs $1.05 per day if you were to sell it at its current value. A mid-2014, 93 cents per day. A late 2013, 97 cents per day, an early 2013, $1.06 per day, and a mid-2012 Retina, 94 cents per day. These figures are all very similar, but there is one thing that is important to note, which is that not all of these models have the same starting price. For example, the mid-2015 and mid-2014 top-tier 15-inch had a price of $2,500. The late 2013 was $2,600, and the early 2013 and mid-2012 were $2,800. So with those models, they had a larger starting price that was spread across more days, which is what allowed their price per day to be very similar. Now, the second thing that I found that was very interesting was that unibody MacBook Pros are some of the cheapest MacBook Pros to buy and to own. So for the purposes of my test, I used the Core i7 unibody MacBook Pros, so I excluded 2009 and before. So starting with 2010, then early 2011, late 2011, and mid 2012, all of the top tier MacBook Pro 15 inches had the same starting price of $2,200. And I found that the 2010 and both 2011s cost about 66 cents per day to own, while the mid-2012 non-Retina brings that up to about 73 cents per day. All of this I thought was very, very interesting because as it stands right now, the cost per day is largely determined by which generation of MacBook Pro you have. The unibody models tend to run you about 60-70 cents per day on average. The Retina ones are closer to $1, and the most recent Touch Bar models are about $1.40. The other thing that I noticed is MacBook Pros have a lot of price fluctuation, and I think we can use this to predict the future for the Touch Bar MacBook Pro. So I noticed that the Retina MacBook Pro started at $2,800 in 2012, stayed at $2,800, and then it dropped down to $26 and then to $25 as we approached a refresh cycle. Now, we currently have two different refreshes for the Touch Bar MacBook Pro, so if I had to guess, I would say that the next generation will probably see a price decrease. So, can we use these findings to predict the future? I think we can, but take it with a grain of salt because we don't know what the future will hold. So assuming that Apple has a pretty regular upgrade path for their MacBook Pros, so the 2016, 17, and then we'll have an 18 or 19, something along those lines, basically having 4 refreshes per generation, I think we can see that the perfect amount of time to own a MacBook Pro is about 4.5 years. Now, the reason that I bring up this figure is I'm not going to count the unibodies in this study because going forward, I don't think it's likely that we're going to see prices drop down that low, especially for top tier models. So I'm going to discount those from this particular study when we're talking about the future. So looking specifically at the Retina MacBook Pros, the 2014 was definitely the lowest cost per day. Then as you continue to hold it for 5 years, the cost goes back up to over $1 per day, and then finally with 2012 it dropped back down under $1. However, I think that if you want to be smart with your money, it would make sense to sell it after 4 years instead of waiting till 6, because the cost per day is about the same and you'll have more upgraded technology. So if you currently have a 2015 MacBook Pro, don't sell it just yet. I would try to get maybe another year or 2, depending on how old your particular model is, out of it so that you can get the lowest cost per day before upgrading. Now, one thing that's interesting about this figure that I came up with, which is owning a MacBook Pro for 4 years, is that seems to be roughly their cycle for major upgrades. So if we think about it this way, 2008, the unibody was introduced. 4 years later in 2012, the Retina was introduced. And then 4 years later in 2016, the Touch Bar was introduced. The most efficient way to buy a MacBook Pro, according to these findings, would be to buy whenever the newest generation comes out. That's if you want to always have the newest one. Your other option is to buy mid-product cycle. So that's when some of the bugs have been worked out and you have some nice hardware upgrades, but you still got 2 years where it's the latest generation. Now, the other thing that I noticed in this study is that the Touch Bar models are significantly more expensive to buy and own than the previous Retina models. I personally chalk this up to them being new and still having that initial hit of depreciation. I think we'll be seeing the prices level out at about the $1 per day as we move further into this latest generation of MacBook Pros. So again, take this study for what it is. It's an observational study and it's not perfect. The prices that I used for the current value are very much ballpark figures. Some sell for far more than I put here. Some sell for much, much less. It depends on the condition, on any issues that you have. It's hard to predict these sort of things, but if you sell right on average sale price, you have good condition, you keep your computer in good shape, I think that these are pretty good target numbers. Also keep in mind that for these purposes, I did not function unforeseen issues. For example, the 2012 and early 2013 Retina MacBook Pros, as well as the 2011 MacBook Pros, have graphics card defects. This may or may not affect the prices that they sell for. It's still kind of hard to tell because 2011 MacBook Pros still regularly sell for about $500, even with these defects. So I personally can't tell if they would sell for more if they didn't have these defects, but that is entirely possible. So yeah, just take this study for what you will. This is not by any means a scientific study. I just wanted to see what results we would get. So thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to head on over to my subreddit if you want to participate in discussion on this or anything else that goes on my channel, and I will see you guys in the next one.